Welcome back to the Shat on TV American Gods edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit Starz show American Gods. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And this is our deep dive episode where we look at this week's episode of American Gods and share our insights, research, and opinions. This week's episode was the season finale entitled Come to Jesus. On the eve of war, Mr. Wednesday must recruit one more old god, Ostara, or Easter, goddess of the dawn, but winning her over will require making a good impression, and that's where Mr. Nancy comes in.
Yeah, I got to be honest, I this is the first time I say it, I loved the episode. I really enjoyed it. I got a lot of things that I'd missed previously, and I'm excited for the next season. And there were points at this season where I wasn't too excited to watch, but today it sold me. I'm back on board 100%, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I know I'd said I'd talk less about things I didn't like about the show and focus more on explaining confusing plot points or symbolism, stuff that I do better than offer opinions. But I got to say that I think people forgive me in saying that I'm going to talk a lot of this about things I loved, seeing more of in episode 8. I think that they brought the show back to things that I really enjoyed. Starting off with Orlando Jones, just coming back as Mr. Nancy. It was the best 2 minutes I think the show has offered. The lighting was great. His delivery was great. A poetic use of profanity. Were there any standout moments of the show for you?
I think there was a lot. I think it was as beautiful as ever. The storytelling is great. But the entire ending, where all the pieces for me fell in place, as to old gods, what are their powers? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? I had questioned a few weeks now, saying the old gods have no chance. How do you compete with the new gods, with technology? The end, I got the answer, and it was that aha moment that now I'm ready for a fair fight, and blood will start to flow. So the ending, I think, was great. It was great to see Wednesday/Odin finally rain fire from the sky, and it was exciting.
Yeah, if you are sick of hearing the negativity you might have heard in the last few episodes of this podcast, particularly coming from me, I think you're going to really be pleased with this one. We got a lot of good things to say. This is our love song to Raj, who couldn't be with us tonight, who is finally vindicated in his adoration of the show. So tonight we're going to talk about Bilquis and how she adapted from her origins at the Temple of Bar-On to her Hollywood mystique. We're going to look into that 70s backstory and what exactly it was talking about, with references to the Iranian Revolution and an attack on the matriarchy. We're going to talk about Raj being right about Technical Boy. He saw this coming from, I think, episode 1, so kudos to him about the nature of Technical Boy and what he wants out of things. We're also going to talk about Easter and her Jesus Con that she hosts in Kentucky, what that was all about. The reveal of Mr. Wednesday's plan. If you didn't quite catch all the pieces of it, we'll go back over that for you. And we're also going to talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of the different gods. So, Big D had asked before, how do the old gods stand a chance? We'll see that there's a different type of worship. There's a different type of power in the old gods and the new, and what's significant about that. So first, let's get back to the highlights of the show. I mentioned Bilquis. I was really impressed with everything they did with Bilquis's character in this episode. In particular, that orgy, her fuckfest, put Westworld's pariah orgy to shame. I mean, we expected the pariah orgy after all the waivers and everything to be something super sexy. Bilquis's party had it going on.
God, you completely read my mind. As I was watching it, that was exactly what I thought. The complaints we had in Westworld's orgy, it didn't seem real. There was nothing sexy about it. This orgy, with the lighting, with seeing just enough and the bodies gyrating and kind of moving like it was one singular animal, was sexy, beautiful, and terrifying at the same time.
I think it was great. You mentioned, I think in episode 2, that you wanted to see Bilquis in her former glory. What was she like at the apex of her power? And when we get to see that, viewers who were already drawn into her magic, or I think were very satisfied with this, but you really get to see what she looked like. I mean, she was gorgeous in these scenes.
And I think it's important. This episode was very female-centric. We cover most of the strong female characters. And Bilquis, it's really important that we see the full arc of her character. We see her at the apex, the pinnacle of her power, to where she's fallen once she comes to the U.S., where she's down and out. And you can understand why she would agree to whore herself out, for lack of a better word, to the new gods. She has nothing else. So when they come offering even the littlest tidbit, the scraps of faith, she has to jump on it. And it makes it completely understandable.
Yeah, I mean, it was great to see what she was accustomed to really give us to set the scene. And so they went all the way back to the Temple of Bara'an. So we're talking BC, and there was this Temple of the Sun and the Temple of the Moon. So this one we're featuring on, we're focusing on the Temple of the Sun, and this is an actual existing temple. And excavation actually revealed that there were temple after temple built on top of each other at this site over thousands of years. So this is again speaking to that idea of gods replacing other gods in this cycle. So you see the show writers did some research here. They really did their homework. And there also, when you see that the people being liquefied in a sense, there actually were these grooves built into the temple that were meant to channel the blood. Now, the blood in this case was normally done from like slaughtering bulls or other animals, not necessarily people. But it is very interesting that they incorporated some of these things. You know, Raj is a big fan of the amount of homework that's been done. He's constantly said that he's impressed with the show writers here. And I think they really did a great job of incorporating some interpretations of reality into this storyline.
I think it was important that they showed that the new gods are not the only ones that have transformed in their methods or their message. The old gods did it as well. We get a chance to see Bilquis modify her technique to fit into the century that she's living within. And it's great. The little timeline, you see that what worked in the past doesn't always work today, and how she's flexible enough to stay relevant up until we hit a point where there's a first bump in the road, which was Iran. And I know you have some background on that you could shed some light for the listeners.
Yeah, it's very important to note that in this development, Anansi is telling the story of Bilquis, and he's telling it in this wonderful scene where he's got a Shadow Moon and Mr. Wednesday. They're hanging out in their robes. Anansi looks badass in that suit. I mean, he looks amazing with that golden light shooting down on him. Orlando Jones just lights up the screen. And but he says a very important thing that I hope people didn't skip over, and he says, "I still know what I am." And it's a very important line. There's a lot of wisdom in what Anansi's saying. And basically what he's saying is that the difference between adapting and simply evolving is that you've got to remember who you are, what you are. And so that's key to a god. So again, we see this shift for Bilquis. Thousands of years, she's doing great until we get into Iran. And overall, Nancy, he's telling the story of how over the years, man was increasingly threatened by the matriarchal society. He talks about women's power to control life and birth. And so what we're seeing in this depiction, in this disco scene, which with an awesome soundtrack, is men using violence, using an assault on the sex to subjugate that power. And he even, in Anansi's story, he even kind of implies that they launder it, that they made a commodity out of sexuality and taking the power away from women. So that it alludes to prostitution, which we then see later in the show.
So my first viewing of this, I thought it was a gay club because it was only women. And then you enlightened me the fact that in Iran at this time of the revolution, it didn't necessarily mean that it was a gay club, that women were segregated from the men when they would go out.
Right, exactly. So my family moved from Iran in 1978. So this is basically during the revolution. And that's what they're depicting here, is that Iran prior to 1978 was largely westernized. They had the Shah, who was basically placed in a monarchy. He was the king, and he had powers and he preferred a Western lifestyle. So people had discos, they had parties, they smoked weed, they went to the beach in bikinis. Iran was not what you think of Iran today. And then came this revolution. And so what you're actually seeing happen here is they had at this point segregated men and women, and that's currently today. It's still the same thing. They cannot go out dancing together. They would be in separate areas. Even if there's a party, if it's a wedding, you're still not allowed to dance together, which is very different from Persians you might have seen in the U.S., where we dance with each other ad nauseum. So they literally were depicting this exact moment in time and relating it back to the idea of an attack by the patriarchy on the matriarchy. My parents that went to discos, people drank. Overnight, all that stuff was gone. And that it symbolizes this threatened religious order dominated by men. And then came the headscarves, strict Islamic law, and everything that we associate with Iran today.
Yeah, so this coming to America is less a coming to America and more of being driven out of your homeland. This was not a migration by choice. This is Bilquis doing what she needs to survive. She knows in Iran she has no future.
Yeah, so again, this is one of the things, the historical points that they point on. So in 2013, I don't think there was actually a Himyaritic temple destruction that was documented on TV, but ISIS was at that time and continues to destroy a lot of religious sites over the past decade. And this specifically is pointing to the Houthi-Salafi conflict that's happening in the eventual civil war in Yemen. So they're using a lot of these historical points. And I'm really glad that the show didn't make the choice to have some sort of Iranian woman, immigrant, tell her story, and she was like, and then the revolution came and then blah, blah, blah. Instead, they went with these cues where they tell us we're in Tehran. You see the woman on the plane who's the woman who escaped the club. She's reading this Farsi to English dictionary. There's an Ayatollah on the cover of that newspaper. You see Air Persia on the aircraft wall. And then they go from that to the woman being in the hospital with HIV. You see that the drugs that are on the bedside and her bracelet refer to HIV. But she's also, if you notice, the serpent bracelet. Even that is symbolic, very subtle. The serpent bracelet in that looped fashion is historically like the Ouroboros that we saw in Westworld. It's a circular snake symbolizes life. And so I did some research on that, too, kind of on the way that a patriarchal religion has changed that symbol. And what I pulled up was there's a blog called The Faithless Feminist. And in that, they talk about the tree of Genesis, which we see, again, the kind of the world tree that's shown in this show. It's significant because that was the symbol of the goddess and of life. And here we see religion turning it on its head. Instead of the snake being what we would see as the symbol of life, we think about the Garden of Eden and that the woman Eve becomes, the first of mankind tempted by the fruit of the tree, and she's tempted by the snake. And so the show is throwing a lot of symbolism in a very compact amount of time at us, and I think it's just a real masterpiece of television. Again, I haven't been on board for everything on this show, but I think that they really nailed it with this. And this is all in like the first, 8 minutes?
But I was wondering what Bilquis's purpose for visiting there was. Was she going there to provide comfort to a believer in their final moments, much like we saw Mad Sweeney last week?
Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly what to make of that. Maybe some of the listeners can help us out by writing in at host@shoutontv.com. To me, I saw it as this was a woman that she had an affinity for. I mean, you saw that it was a very sexy scene that they had in the disco. It could be that. It could be, like you said, that she was bringing comfort to a follower. And another way to look at it is that HIV, when you think about its implication, is if you consider sex and free love of the 70s as a sort of celebration of life and a celebration of sensuality and everything that Bilquis represents, then the way to stop it is HIV, right? It's a disease that specifically made people terrified. It's really the disease that killed free love in America.
Yeah, and we've started to see that gods use different types of warfare against their fellow gods to try to sway followers and to curry favor. And Mad Sweeney makes it clear at the end that gods have been fucking with us since the beginning. So I'm starting to question, was it this disease created as a way to usurp power from Bilquis?
I mean, I think we do see that there are different types of warfare, and the show did a really great job with this finale of really opening our eyes to the fact that the extent of the power from these gods is we haven't even begun to explore it. I thought chopping a head off was a big deal. Like, we're seeing lightning flying out of the sky, crops being decimated. You got Mr. World just sending tap dancing henchmen after people. Like, we're going to see some crazy shit in the upcoming seasons, and that's an exciting notion. So you mentioned earlier Bilquis turning to any scrap of worship that she could find. Raj asked early in the series, when we first saw Bilquis take her first victim, if you will, if she was using an online dating app, and if so, I mean, we see the app. If so, does that tie in with Technical Boy? Is she using technology and therefore in league with the new gods, or at least using their platform? We now see that's the case in this episode. She's using this app called Sheba, which Tech Boy gives her, and that really helps her rise from the streets to becoming, this beautiful goddess once again. It's a recruitment tool.
Yeah, and it's obvious now that the old gods have been oppressed and they've been preyed upon by the new gods for some time now. And they're selling false hope. They offer relevance and change, But what they're really doing is they're subtly selling obscurity. Yes, the app helps Bilquis gain power, but that power isn't genuine. She's gaining power through people who don't worship her by name. So for the last couple of years, Technical Boy, shows that he's been providing a service when they're down, but he expects them to pay it back when they have something to offer. And unfortunately, Bilquis, she's got bills to pay.
I think we got a lot more sense out of Technical Boy in this episode as well. So in the past, he's kind of spoken in idioms and has been very scatterbrained. I think in this one, we got some real solid dialogue out of him. And one of the things he says to Bilquis, he says, worship is a volume business. Whosoever has the most followers wins the game. And at one point, it's a statement on how the new gods view the war, right? So they are talking volume, whereas the old gods talk about depth, right, of the sacrifice. But this also speaks, it's a statement on us, on as people, this idea of social media and of worship there, right? And it's a moment where the show is really speaking to the audience and making us think, does the volume of likes that you're getting on something that you post, is that what worship is? Is the person who has the most followers the winner? Or is it the depth of the connection? If you have a family that loves you deeply and you are a tight unit and you have your child and you raise your child, or you have your wife or your husband and you have a deep love, is that more powerful than having 1,000 people like you on Instagram? It's a question that they're asking you as the audience, and it really made me sit back and think, and it was one of the more poignant moments of the show.
Well, this was the turning point for me in questioning whether the old gods have a chance. The new gods, through the entire season, have been acting as they're indestructible, but underlying that is a true fear. They wouldn't be coming to the table and negotiating with Wednesday if they were from a power position. They know that, yes, they have a quantity of followers, but it's superficial, it's passive. It requires no devotion. You sit mindlessly looking at your screen. So the new gods, even though they have more, it is not quality. And when it comes down to it, the old gods can force and compel a level of devotion that the new gods and technology can only dream of.
I want to talk about, before we close out on Bilquis, I want to talk about what she's up to at the end of this episode. So I spoke with a few listeners who are a little confused as to what's going on. So some people thought that Bilquis kills Technical Boy, and we see that happens off screen, and then she goes to House on the Rock to join the old gods. That's not what I picked up from it. What I picked from it was something very different. We see her on the bus in the end scene, and to me, I believe that she's Technical Boy is calling his favor in, and she's being sent to infiltrate the House of the Rock, where the old gods are gathering. Is that what you picked up? Did you see something different?
I think it's far more nefarious than just having someone on their side to listen in on the old gods. She is a weapon. Technical Boy has brought her back up to a certain level of power, and now he's going to point her in the direction of the old gods. And I believe it has to be a specific target in mind. When Bilquis is attempting to seduce him, sliding her hand up his thigh, and he says, point that gun in a different direction. Do you have any ideas? What do you think she's going after?
I mean, I'm not sure, but one of the things that people have, some of the feedback that I've heard on this episode is that it wasn't a cliffhanger, and it also wasn't a climax. Like, in essence, it wasn't what you would expect to see out of a season finale, that there weren't enough cliffhangers. And I thought actually quite different. You see Ostera basically killing all these crops. How's that going to play out? You've got Bilquis being sent to the House on the Rock, and who knows who she's being sent after. I like this idea of her being a weapon. And you've also got Shadow being reunited with Laura, and how that's going to go right there. I mean, you've got the standoff in this courtyard, and to me, there are several cliffhangers that they get me excited for season 2.
Yeah, I think the biggest cliffhangers, there are some questionable gods and some players on the board that you don't know where Mad Sweeney's true devotion lay. Bilquis is obviously having some reservations about what she has to do to pay back her debt. I didn't need some big secret reveal or cliffhanger to get me to come back next year. Creating a good quality show that has a compelling storyline, that's enough, and I was happy at the end. They've now gotten all the pieces on the board, and it's going to be fun to watch them go at each other.
So this scene between Mr. Wednesday, Shadow, the New Gods, and Easter, this happens during what I dubbed Jesus Con in Kentucky, right? So we're in Kentucky, where Easter's home, and we see all these Jesus gathering together on Easter. Raj had asked, after we saw the border crossing scene in an earlier episode, if we would get to see all these different Jesuses and what it would look like. I thought we would see Jesus, what they're dubbing Jesus Prime, right? So Jeremy Davies from Lost, who played Daniel Faraday. I knew we would see that Jesus, but did you expect all these Jesuses? And I didn't understand the point of this. I thought it went on a little too long, but maybe it worked for other people. I don't know.
No, I thought it was good because Jesus is not a singular God. When people pray to Jesus, he takes many forms based on cultural background, where you were raised. So it was nice to see a diverse portrayal of Jesus. And I thought it was kind of nice that Jesus was very sensitive and actually seemed offended and hurt at the accusation from Wednesday that he had somehow taken Easter away from Ostera. But I still believe that he has some good old-fashioned wrath left in his bones. But right now, they all seemed like a nice bunch of Jesuses.
Dude, Jesus Prime was he was the most Zen Jesus I've ever saw. He's sitting cross-legged, floating on the water. I mean, this was a Jesus that I did not expect. I thought he was going to be the American Jesus that was very cheese, that was very maybe he really liked, like a Johnny Cage from Mortal Kombat, throwing millions of dollars around and stuff like that. So it was an interesting take on Jesus, and they picked a very gentle actor to play it out.
Yeah, I'm not very religious myself. But I do envision, if God is the way that he is portrayed in the Bible, that he would be very much like this. Have a caring heart, be kind, be accepting. I don't think that God would be as judgmental as most of the churches in this country lead you to believe he is. You even see when Wednesday questions his intentions, his halo kind of flickers a bit like, oh, you're hurting my feelings. It was awesome to say.
It was like Teletubby Jesus. It was interesting. But, I took a catalog of some of the Jeezi that we saw, and I noticed that, the Virgin Mary was there breastfeeding. There was an Asian Jesus. I thought for a second I had to go Google and check the credits at the end because, Powers Booth unfortunately died earlier this year, and I'm a big fan of his. If you're not familiar, he was Cy Tolliver in Deadwood, just an amazing actor. And I thought that maybe they had reunited him with Mr. Wednesday, Ian McShane, who also was in Deadwood. And so there was an Orthodox Jesus with the candy running through his stigmata, and I thought that might be Powers Booth. I still can't get a conclusive answer on that. If anybody knows if that was actually Powers Booth, that would make my fucking life if that was actually him. But he's got a beard going. I can't tell if it's him. One thing I noticed, though, is that I didn't see Mexican Jesus, and I wondered if he was absent because he was shot to death, which got me thinking about the nature of the gods. And after kind of putting the pieces together, I think I've got a Gene's theory here, or at least Gene's idea on what's going on. And again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Write in at host@shadowontv.com. But what it seems to me is what the show is set up is that the gods can survive if they're forgotten. In the sense that, like say Mad Sweeney or Bilquis, even if the last follower died, they can still survive. They can still be alive. They won't do well. They're not powerful, but they can still survive. If they are killed in that state, then they're done for. That's why Bilquis can be run down or gain strength. Why Vulcan could be put down. But even though he was strong, he can't come back necessarily unless people believe him. And the way to think about that is, Mr. Wednesday says essentially that the only thing that could really kill them, absolutely kill them, is if they're forgotten. So, for instance, in Jesus' case, if Jesus is to be killed, another Jesus would just take his place, i.e. resurrection, right? So there's still belief in Jesus, so Jesus has to always exist. If they were to kill a Jesus and somebody else closed their eyes and believed in that Jesus, they would come back again. And that led me to believe that maybe that's why Mr. Wednesday needs Shadow so badly.
Well, you mentioned resurrection, and Ostera mentions as an alternative re-life. So I'm not sure if it's possibly less of a resurrection and as kind of a different state of living, that they go to a holding pattern and then they're just revived. So it's less them coming back from the dead because they were never dead, It's just resetting them. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, they make that distinction, and I think that's a really good point, Big D, that I hadn't thought about, was that a real life versus a resurrection. But I do think that it is, if you see how hard the old gods scrap to stay alive, being alive means much more to them. And you see the new gods, they're kind of flippant about things. They don't take things as seriously. And I think a part of that is, I mean, you see Mr. World struck down when he takes control of one of the minions there. And he's not worried about it because he still exists so many other places, you know? I think same with Technical Boy, same with media. Whereas as a god is increasingly forgotten, say Bilquis, for instance, she may only exist in that one form. And if she's taken out, then she will cease to ever be.
Yeah, and you have to remember that the old gods are ancient. They've had ebbs and flows of faith, times where they're thriving and times also where they're really struggling. With that comes a knowledge. They've learned to survive. They've become crafty. And this isn't the first fight that they've had on their hands, but they do have a glaring weakness to me. It's vanity, where vanity has kept them alive for all these years, that they want to be known, they want to be remembered. But it also blinds them, and it's clearly their weakness. Wednesday can easily twist Ostera, who in the beginning of the episode is completely happy to be worshipped namelessly, that she has made an agreement with the new gods, but they're not really worshiping her. And it's easy for Wednesday to leverage that vanity to get her to say, don't you want to be worshipped? Don't you want them to know your name? And she's easily flipped. So I think vanity is a strength and a weakness for the old gods.
It is interesting, though, to ask, you know, whether Wednesday is doing them a favor or not, right? I mean, in here you see that he comes in and he's convincing her, but as she says, she's got things going pretty well. I mean, as far as a life goes, she's not doing like Bilquis, where she has to, you know, live on the streets, or where she's, you know, essentially having to really scrape to get that worship. She's doing pretty well for herself, and it does beg the question, what would be wrong with just living that lifestyle out, having the nice house, having, you know, friends, and having a good life? Is he doing her a favor, or is he preying on her vanity?
No, he's asking, do you want to survive or do you want to thrive? Yes, she seems like she's doing well now, but deep inside she knows people aren't worshiping her. They're worshiping the peeps, the eggs that are hidden, the Easter bunny, all the things that are not her. So yes, she's living a nice life, but deep in her core, she knows it's superficial. And even though she has the power, she still, for all intents and purposes, has been forgotten. She's irrelevant.
One of the things to keep in mind, you know, you asked about how the old gods stood a chance against the new gods. One of the things to keep in mind is that, yeah, we like social media. We like media. We like technology. We trust in the government to some extent, unless you watched Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. But look at the core of a human being, right? What is more important to me than sex and reproduction, anger and war, and eating, right? Like, these are the primary things that we need. And so that God is always going to be more powerful. And it's very interesting that we as a society have come to worship a God that we don't ask for food necessarily, in America at least, and we don't ask for to be fruitful, to have to have sex and to bear children, and we don't look to a God to necessarily give us victory in war, right? We're beyond that. Our God is about an afterlife and about morality and judgment, right? And so it's interesting to go, you know, where do our hearts lie? And that might be where the real power is.
So the new gods, one of their tricks they've done, just like they're tricking humans, they've convinced the old gods that without technology, they're irrelevant. They're forgotten. Their sales pitch is, you're old, we're going to make you new again. And they're going to offer survival. But I don't think they're really offering survival. They're just stringing them along. And it's only a matter of time until the old gods realize that they don't require the permission of technology to leverage that platform. If there is a plague or pestilence or spring fails to come, that message is going to propagate through social media, on the web. There's nothing that the new gods can do to stop that.
Yeah, it's like Mr. Wednesday says when he's explaining why the old gods have the power, why the new gods are even there. He says, people make gods when they want to know why things happen. You want to make good things happen, be good to your gods. You give a little, you get a little. The simplicity of the bargain has always been appealing. That's why you're here, and that's precisely why I matter. And I thought it was beautifully put. That was a great bit of writing in the sense that humans gave the power to the gods. They wanted to know why crops failed or why crops did well. They wanted to know why different things happened. And so they made the gods to explain that. And in so doing so, they gave the gods that power. But once the gods have given that power, it cannot be revoked in the sense that, now Odin does control the weather. Now Easter does control the harvest. And so or not the harvest, but the spring. And so I think that it was a really excellent way of putting it into the show, and it kind of establishes exactly what their powers are, which is not to say that the new gods don't have power. Clearly, they have an emerging power that they still can weigh over old gods' heads, as we see with Technical Boy and Bilquis. So that brings us to Mr. Wednesday's plan. And again, I think it would be good to go over that plan again in case it was lost in all the razzle-dazzle of the show. There is a solid plan that Mr. Wednesday is revealing, and it seems to do a lot with suffering. First of all, you know that Wednesday is a con man. Again, he comes in, Shadow does nothing to stop him. He comes right in and lies to Easter about Vulcan's death. This shows a couple things. One, that Shadow is not necessarily interested in doing what's right, but in fact, he is squarely in the ploy of Mr. Wednesday. They made the deal with the Mead. He's Wednesday's man. So Wednesday comes in, lies to Easter. So again, showing that he is a bit more nefarious than we expected. He does not necessarily have her best interests in mind. And he says that the new gods killed Vulcan. He then shows Easter the sword that Vulcan forged as a sign of Vulcan's allegiance to the old god, blaming Vulcan's death on the new gods and saying essentially that, she could be next, that the new gods are not to be trusted, that her pact with them is not safe.
But I don't know that she's buying it. She makes it evident that she doesn't trust Wednesday and that he lies constantly. So why would she believe anything he says?
Well, what's really interesting about it is you look at it from a perspective of, Raj isn't here to make a comic book reference, Marvel Comics specifically, but I will. This is very Magneto. Like if you're looking at this from a different prism, Wednesday is a villain in this sense. He is willing to put people's lives on the line. He's willing to hurt humanity, to starve people, in order to make them pray again, in order to make them worship again. And he has no qualms about doing that. To bring the old gods to power, he does not, give a fuck about mankind necessarily. He is all about the ends justifying the means here.
God, you look at the pain that he's caused Shadow alone. To find out that he was behind his arrest and incarceration and the death of Laura, he doesn't even care about Shadow, who he purports to care about deeply. There is no one above his lust for power.
And I thought that reveal came from a pretty excellent scene. Again, I've been outspoken about not really liking Emily Browning. I actually kind of smiled when she showed up in the fucked up ice cream truck at this scene, kind of hops out, and it was this dichotomy of the gods and the mortals, that these are mortals showing up at a god party there. But in that scene between Mad Sweeney and Laura, where they're kind of revealing all this, where she crunches his nuts until he spills the beans, essentially once it's all revealed, you realize that Mr. Wednesday orchestrated the whole thing. He's responsible for her death, for Robbie's death, for Shadow getting arrested, for the robbery going wrong, all the things that you mentioned. All that for what? And Mad Sweeney can't even articulate why Shadow is so important to him.
Well, it's clear that he is important. Ostera even recognizes that he is the boy that has everyone so upset. And you wanted a cliffhanger? To me, as a non-book reader, I want to know what the hell is so important about Shadow that you would have played out this con so far back to take everything away from him that mattered and that he cared about, so he believed in nothing to simply build him back up. He must be of the utmost importance, and that's enough of a cliffhanger for me.
I mean, you look at the scene after this huge show of strength by Mr. Wednesday, which, by the way, I thought looked a little cheesy.
No.
His first question to Shadow is, you didn't think the Odin? You didn't think that was cheesy?
Oh, come on. Listen, we've had some cheesy scenes in the show. That wasn't one of them. That was the way I envisioned the wrath of God coming down.
I was talking with one of the listeners, King B, earlier today, and he referenced the scene where Wyatt Earp goes apeshit at the creek. No! Very similar to the Odin scene there. So, anything that relates back to Tombstone's okay with me. But when we talk about that, though, the first question after that, though, essentially, is he's asking Shadow is, do you believe? Do you believe in me? And then he goes over, the litany of names that he's called by and then finally reveals his power. It's an important scene, and it shows where his priorities are. That perhaps most of this is designed to earn Shadow's belief. And why is that so important? I think it's something we'll see very soon.
Well, they question throughout the episode a few times. Shadow raises the fact of whether their compact is still intact. And this clear display of power and immediately asking Shadow to reaffirm his belief and dedication was not accidental.
One of the things I noticed, and I wonder if you picked it up too, is, I've complained about some of the performances among the actors on the show, the cast on the show, and I realized that the big name actors is something I pointed out when we did a preview of the cast, but I think it's worth highlighting again. If you look at the Ian McShane, the Kristen Chenoweth, the Corbin Burnson, the Gillian Anderson, like you look at all these actors, they're all playing gods. The big name actors are playing the gods, and they've got a lot of stage presence. They got a lot of character. They're used to holding a screen together. And then you look at the mortals, and you're looking more to the Ricky Whittle, the Emily Browning. And I wonder if it didn't really strike me as being true until I saw this episode. When you see Kristen Chenoweth on one side of your screen, done up, gorgeous, just exuding confidence in life, and you see Emily Browning on the other side, dead, and just basically no eloquence to her speech, no class exuded in this home, this beautiful home. And I wonder, is this all intentional? Are they trying to show the salt of the earth, irreverent humans, and then the gods that have a little bit of pizzazz?
Of course. There's a familiarity that we have with the big name actors and actresses. And it makes sense to have them portray the gods.
So Big D and I, as you can see, we're big fans of this episode. I know Raj was a big fan of this episode, but I want to hear from the listeners, the viewers. What did you think about this season finale? What did you think about this season overall? You can write into us at hosts@shadontv.com. Basically just wondering if you were a big fan like Coach Marcus. Were you satisfied with this ending to a season? Will it hold you over until season 2? If you hated it, was there any way that this show could have redeemed itself? Did you see anything, a light at the end of the tunnel with this episode? So that concludes this week's episode of Shad on TV American Gods Edition. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shad on TV. Facebook, search for Shad on TV Podcasts. The website is shadontv.com, and you can email us again at hosts@shadontv.com. A week from now, we'll be doing a recap episode where we're going to talk about the season in review, also talking about what we'd like to see in season 2. So please share your ideas for that too. Again, writing in at hosts@shadontv.com. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by on iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. Also, you can check out our store on the website for cool Shad on TV merchandise that helps keep the lights on. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D and Roger Roper, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us on Thursday for the American Gods Confessional and hearing from you, the listeners. Thanks for listening, and hail the old gods.